people into my world.
All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. Thank you, folks, for joining the Facebook Live today. Really appreciate it. Ricardo, Lisa, thank you both for being on today. My name is Vivian Topping. My pronouns are she and they, and I am the Director of Advocacy and Civic Engagement at the Equality Federation. Lisa, Ricardo, do you want to introduce yourselves first? We can start with Ricardo and then go to Lisa.
Sure. My name is Ricardo Martinez. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Equality Texas. Pronouns he, him. Anything else?
No, great.
And my name's Lisa Chang, and my pronouns are she, her. And I've been with Equality Texas since June 2nd.
Welcome to the team, Lisa. Great time to start during a pandemic. So we are here today because today is Give Out Day, the National LGBTQ Day of Giving for organizations. Both the Equality Federation and Equality Texas and many of our members across the country are participating today and raising money to support the work happening on the ground for LGBTQ folks. So I just want to start. I know for some folks, this might be the first time that they've heard about Give Out Day, or this might be the first time they're participating. For y'all, why would you say that Give Out Day is so important, particularly for a state-based organization?
Well, one, I want to say that I'm super happy to be here with you, Viv. I think, I appreciate the Federation so much, and everyone who works with y'all, and having your support is super, super helpful for our work. In terms of Give Out Day, I've done this since its inception, probably 8 years ago when I started doing it with Listen and supporting all of our chapters. And for smaller organizations like ours, like some of the chapter-based organizations across the country, $10,000 as a goal for this day makes a tremendous difference, right? It really makes a difference to our bottom line and to continue the great work that we're focused on here.
Yeah. What kind of work are you all kind of like specifically talking about today for Give Out Day? It's like, where's some of that money going? What is some of the kind of like your focus for today?
Yeah, the money that we're raising is going to go directly to continue our education, our engagement, and our mobilizing and our movement building here in Texas. One of my favorite things that we are doing is connecting directly with our advocates across the country, right? And thanks to thanks to COVID, we had to pivot, right? We love doing this stuff in person, directly connecting with people and individuals, meeting them where they are. And, COVID offered up a challenge of, well, we're going to keep you home and we're going to make it even harder to connect with people. And, education, engagement, and mobilizing can still happen virtually. It might look a little bit differently, but our focus is to continue the education, the issue education, the engagement with our advocates, getting them inspired, getting them motivated, getting them feeling confident about their individual power as we make our way towards Leg Session 2021.
Yeah, that's such important work. As someone who worked in Texas, I know how much work has to be done there and how great the community is in Texas in really building that and doing that work. So speaking of goals, Lisa, how is Equality Texas doing so far today?
Well, like I said, I've been here for a little less than a month, and I have to tell you that I've been at a lot of organizations that have the intention to uplift marginalized communities, but I really don't think that they were really looking at it from an equity perspective. I mean, from that lens, because I think they were fighting for smaller gains where they could find it, and they were making concessions. And so I'm really proud of our recent public pledge to anti-racism, because everything that we do has to be grounded in anti-racist frame for it to move forward. So that was my first week on the job, and getting to work with our team, our small but mighty team, has been such a joy. And I have to say that we're working on a comprehensive non-discrimination bill that I think we're going to be really proud of in the upcoming session. And we're going to work to right some wrongs too, with like the Gainsford hate crimes legislation of 2003. So I think there's a lot of things that we're excited about, and we're going to work with different legislative caucuses, and so more to come. And I'm just really excited to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you.
Goals for fundraising for today.
I was going to say, so my other question was, in terms of like your fundraising for today, your goal, Ricardo, I think mentioned was your goal was 10,000. We're now at about partially through the day. How are you all doing on your goal for today?
We've raised a few gifts since our email blast went out, but we still have a ways to go. We have until 11:59 tonight. So we'll continue urging our supporters to do that. But I think Ricardo has something to say about that. So I'll prompt him now.
This is the best part about having a director of development, when you forget to solicit folks and make a plug for the importance of Give Out Day and donating to organizations like Equality Texas that work to protect and expand the rights of LGBTQ people in our states. They will put you in check, and they will let you know that you missed the mark. So for anyone that has the ability to and is familiar with our work, we need as many cheerleaders as possible, whether it's here in Texas or across the country.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say, we're going to talk a little bit about our partnership, the way that we work together, and some of the things that you're doing, and go a little bit more in depth on that statement that you all put out. But as folks are watching here, if you can make sure, go to the Give Out Day page for Equality Texas, give to them. Go to the Give Out Day page for Equality Federation as well. Give to us. We're all working towards really important things today. And so we're really excited to be able to uplift some of the work that y'all are doing in Equality Texas. So Ricardo, you came on earlier this year, and you and I have gotten to work. I know, right? Feels like a year that you've been here. It started in February, and then like January, I can't even remember, and have kind of dove right into the work. But we've been doing a partnership called Project Game Changer for the past few months as well. Can you tell folks a little bit about that and how you all are kind of like building out your organizing program?
Yeah, I come from organizations that have a robust like field program, right? And for us, one of the things that is really super important for the survival of our organization and the expansion of the LGBTQ movement in Texas is field work, right? So connecting directly with our advocates, expanding our connection across Texas with folks who want to own pieces of our work and get involved with Equality Texas, right? And we've been working in collaboration with the Federation, Equality Federation, to lay the groundwork that supports movement building, right? So that means all of that structure, all of that meatiness that we need in terms of systems that allow us to connect with people, engage, reintroduce our work to people that maybe were engaged with us previously, but are no longer, those people that have never heard of Equality Texas that want to be engaged in advocacy, and then making sure that throughout the advocacy process, people feel supported by us, right? And that might mean education, that might mean some basic forms of engagement, right? Creating a database that supports volunteerism, making sure that we have our volunteers' contact information, we're able to follow up, that we're able to document their interests, that we can reach out to them when opportunities come up, right? All of those structural pieces that might have been missing from our process, or that lived in the minds of some of our previous staff members, y'all are helping us to fortify and develop. So super excited about it.
Yeah, really excited to see some of the work that y'all are doing. And so I know that you mentioned a little bit about some of the harms that have been done in the past and things that you're kind of like working towards right now. Ricardo, I know that you all have talked about some of the work that you're kind of like pushing to really support smaller grassroots organizations on the ground and be able to support more racial justice focused organizations. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you all are doing to kind of move in that direction right now?
Yeah, so I want to take you back a little bit to last year. I think October, when I had my final interview with the board, and I sold them on this presentation where I came up with like the 5 P's of progress, right? What are those 5 things that Ricardo's going to do over the course of the next year to move the needle and kind of help Equality Texas evolve? And I promised to prioritize partnerships, people in power, fundraising, PHU, policy and programs. Lisa wants me to move fundraising to philanthropy because I think she just doesn't like the idea that a word is misspelled, and that's okay. I like to have fun with language, but part of those 5 Ps, and one of the most important parts for me, is just partnerships, right? Being really thoughtful about creating a landscape that supports change and sustains change over time. And for me, and for Equality Texas, our board and our staff, it was super important for us to use our platform to be able to collaborate with another organization, the Texas Pride Impact Fund, to come up with the Queer Texas Crisis Fund, which essentially it's an effort to raise about $100,000 over the course of the next 2 months, so that we in September collectively can distribute that money to organizations across Texas that are doing really great work at the intersections between race and LGBTQ identity. And we know that the statewide organization, we can't cover every part of the state, right? So organizations like the Montrose Center in Houston, the Borderline Rainbow Center in El Paso, STEP in Southern Texas, Tent, they're all doing really quality work, and we want to be able to support organizations that are leading that work, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I know one of the things that we talked about too before we started going on here was, what are some of the needs for LGBTQ Texans? And you had an interesting response when we said that. When you hear that question, kind of like, where do you go? What is your statement there?
I like to operate from certainty, right? And that's always important to me. So like if I don't have factual or evidence-based answers, for me, it's a little bit, you'll see it in my face. I will have some hesitancy. And so when you asked me that in preparation for this call, I was like, we're in the process of finding out, right? For the last 6 to 7 months, we really have worked to internally, fortify our organization so that we can be of service to LGBTQ Texans, right? There had to be a lot of systemic work done internally for us to be able to show up actively and in the way that people deserve us to, right? We're a team of 8 people, just 8, right? And I know that we're a statewide organization. 8 people can do a lot, but it's a lot of work for 8 people. And so when you ask me, what are the needs of Texans, we're going to find out, right? I want to be able to, with certainty, tell you we have polled our supporters. We have reached out to people beyond our list of supporters and our Facebook page to find out exactly what it is that people care about, right? So that we are aligning our mission to those needs and to the urgent matters that are impacting our community.
Yeah, definitely.
So when you have hesitation, that's what you get.
Yeah, no, totally. I totally hear that. And I think that's really important. And so, when you're thinking about how that informs some of your state policy work and like what the future looks like as you're digging into the work with Equality Texas, what does that look like moving forward? And how are you all feeling about it right now?
We're in a place of expedited continuous evolution, right? We have to change as an organization, partially because of the pledge that we made, but partially because we truly do want to represent the people in Texas, and we want folks to stand behind us confidently, knowing that we have their best interests in mind, right? And so we're in the process of asking ourselves those questions, right? So come legislative session 2021, outside of LGBTQ issues, what else do we need to do to show up actively for all of our constituents and every part of our constituents, right? And are there intersectional issues that we haven't necessarily paid attention to or prioritized in the past that we need to, right? And, like I said before, we're going to connect with our communities more actively. I've already done some of that stuff. My first 5 months on the job before COVID hit, and I have been cooped up here in my apartment. But I think we're in the process of asking ourselves those difficult questions and going through the process of like being really honest with ourselves of where we may have dropped the ball and where we need to show up and how.
Yeah, and I think I want to name, I'm not speaking for him, this kind of naming this as like a movement problem. I think one of the things that we see consistently and that we're seeing right now as folks are kind of reckoning with some of the work that's happening around racial justice, and as organizations are really being taken to task for the things that we have, is that the lack of Black trans folks who are actually in leadership at organizations. And, you know, I want to name that on this call right now, we don't have any Black trans folk who are able to be on this call because we don't have folks who work for our organizations. And I think that is a difficult thing to struggle with and to have to handle and know. And especially right now in this moment, there's so much work that's happening at the moment where we are coming to terms with things as a movement and as organizations where we haven't done the work that we're supposed to have done. And so, you know, I know that you all did release a statement recently on that, and there's kind of like a journey to get to there. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it was like to put together that statement? And, you know, Ricardo, especially as a non-Black leader of color, kind of leading in this moment and putting together that statement. What has that been like for y'all?
Oof, it's been challenging, right? I want to be transparent, and I think we've had this conversation previously, and I've had this conversation with Lisa before, where, you know, this is my first time at the executive director CEO rodeo, right? So acclimating to a new state, to a new position, is hard already, right? No one prepares you for this job. I think there's a lot you learn on your own, but you add COVID to it, you add the protests that occurred earlier this month. I think it becomes exponentially harder, right? And I have always wanted to do this out of a place of, I think, kindness and justice, right? Like, I have been doing this work since I was 12 years old, and I don't know anything different. And so for me, when the protests began, I was just really sad, right? And so sad, so deeply sad, that I felt really immobilized by the moment, right? I didn't know what to do. I was panic stricken because I wanted to show up in the right way for our community, especially for folks who were engaged with us in the past, Black folks who were engaged with us in the past and no longer, both board members, staff, and community members who have expressed to me through our individual interactions that we haven't shown up for them, right? That's real for me. And it's something that I carry with me as kind of a check-in access point to make sure that we do better, right? But in that moment, I knew that I couldn't just release kind of a blanket statement saying like, hey, we stand in solidarity with Black folks, but we haven't. And that's a reality. And I didn't know the appropriate way to navigate that situation. And after some personal reckoning, I turned off all of my devices for that weekend. I didn't reply to any email so that I could just pay attention to my thoughts and really be centered in what is most authentic to me and my leadership. And I want to lead from a very heart-centered place, from a very reflective and maybe empathetic space. And I just didn't think that we could move forward unless we issued a public apology and a public commitment that was transparent, but also where people could hold us to account, right? With an action plan that folks could come back to us and say like, well, have you done this, right? And that we could on a monthly basis or every couple of months report back to our community saying like, this is where we are along that process, right? So Lisa and I, when she first started, began drafting this really long statement, and I thought it was in a good place, and we shopped it around to trusted colleagues and our board members, and it just wasn't right. We were trying to take people through a story, right? And it wasn't urgent enough, it wasn't angry enough, and it really, I think the audience that it was reaching out to was, again, we were managing, I don't want to skirt around language, we were managing the fragility of our audience, right? Rather than speaking to Black folks. And so we went back and we spent 5 days on this statement because it was important for us to not release something that was half-assed. And I'm sorry that I had to say that, but
you're good.
wanted it to be good. And we took our time until we were able to do it. And we wanted to release something, that we could hold ourselves to, because we want to be better, and we can't be better without accountability.
Yeah.
I do have to say that was my first week on the job. So I immediately got to work for hours a day with Ricardo on this. And I saw his visionary leadership and what he wanted to lead with. And we went back and forth because, we started off by talking about 2020 and what it's meant to have essential workers often be Black and brown people, people who are living on the margins, refugees and immigrants, and people who are largely invisible in our society. And we got feedback that was like, this letter is really trying to be too many things. And then Ricardo decided to move into this direction where he wanted to make this public apology. But, he's been in leadership for 7 months of this organization that's, 30 years old. And a lot of these things, he's hearing stories about how we've wronged different communities in the past. So this is all inherited knowledge, but by taking the helm of the CEO position, he's inheriting all that, right? So he's owning it. And I think, as director of development, I have, but also coming from Seattle, which is a very, they have Chaz, it's a very socially progressive environment, but honestly, a lot of Seattle organizations struggle with moving into community building because there was so much about fighting for rights and making those intelligent arguments that there's a lot of hypocrisy in Seattle. There's tech, there's people being pushed out, mostly Black and brown people who've lived in historic neighborhoods of Seattle. So I've seen organizations try to do anti-racist work fail miserably. And, one of the things I was afraid of, I was like, I've seen Black and brown leaders be put into the post of CEO or executive director, and then there is a white flight of board members and resources. We have to address that systemic racism and inequality has also led to, white people in this country also having most of the resources and also being able to designate where funds go. So when it does start moving into talking about dismantling, systems of oppression that have upheld white supremacy, then it is, getting into white fragility and all of those things that make people uncomfortable. So there were so many things to balance. And I just feel like there's never going to be a perfect statement by any organization, but if you stay grounded in truth and you're sincere about it, and you are transparent about what that journey looked like and that process of still trying to get it right, even if you are told again and again how much you messed it up, I think you can still see progress. So I'm very proud to be part of this team because I think that we're authentic in what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And I just will add, Viv, before we move on, I think the reason why I was so happy of the way that it turned out was because I didn't feel like I didn't have the support of anyone on staff or our board, right? Our entire staff, our entire board was in support of this message, right? And this, to a certain degree, puts you in a vulnerable space, right? Because people will call you out on those 7 things that we said that we're going to achieve. And that's okay. That's exactly why it was done, right? Because I want to make sure that we are being held to account. So yes, it was a really difficult process to get through because we were managing so many variables. But at the end of the day, I felt confident in the release of the statement because I had everyone's support.
Yeah. I know that for all of you, this is you trying to kind of really apologize for past harms that the folks who are currently at the organization, at least on staff, have mostly like not participated in, but are now owning and kind of like taking action on. So, and I want to stay on this for a little bit. So you all have mentioned like some of the accountability statements that are in your letter. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those are so that folks can hear? I know there are folks who are asking about like specific actions that folks are taking in the comments. And so what are some like the accountability things that you all are doing to kind of make sure that you're holding yourselves accountable, that other folks can hold you accountable?
Yeah, that's a great question. We wanted a mix of things that we could do immediately and things that we knew were going to take some time, right? Number one, I think we wanted to shift quickly by centering and uplifting queer, Black voices and intersectional issues that are important to our members that we might have shied away from in the past, right? And this takes a bit of courage because it is a different way to communicate than we have in the past, right? But this moment provided us an opportunity to do so, to show up in a different way because the moment necessitated it, right? So centering and uplifting Black voices was something that we could do almost immediately. And I'm not saying that we are really great at it yet, right? But we will be as we continue to integrate diverse experiences on our board and our staff and our volunteers, and we get the supportive training that allows for folks to have those considerations and allow people the opportunity to engage with us maybe in a different way. The second part of the promise was auditing our internal policies to remove barriers which limit our ability to achieve a more equitable organization, right? And I'm talking about internal systems, right? Mm-hmm. An organization has to be able to support Black and brown folks. And there are a lot of things that need to be done by organizations to make that possible, right? We don't have an HR function. And we are likely going to need an independent third party to help us get through these efforts. So we're doing research and soliciting referrals from trusted friends and colleagues. That consultant is likely going to help setting up protocol for whistleblower complaints, setting up an affordable HR function, drafting an equity statement, formalizing our values, suggesting onboarded trainings on anti-racism, and then helping us with our benefits, right? So that we are able to provide the best quality benefits at limited cost to our staff and their families. Then it's training staff and board on racial equity, power, privilege, and intersectionalities. We are working with the board right now for them to begin to do their individual work, right? We understand that everyone is in a different place at this very moment, right? Some of us have experienced and acknowledged our whiteness. Some of us have experienced trainings before on anti-racism, maybe power and privilege, but some people haven't, right? And they're asking these questions for the very first time. So we're making available to them options on which they can engage in training that feels good for them so that they can own that individual work, right? And this is in partnership with the Borderland Rainbow Center. We are taking full advantage of their free training that they have on anti-racism. It's a 3-part module, but also circulating other options for our board, right? And that will culminate with a full board training with courageous conversations about beyond diversity, right? And we're in the process of trying to schedule a virtual engagement for our board that maybe is the equivalent of a 2-day full immersion training that we had planned in March, but ultimately because of COVID had to be pushed away, right? Yeah. We're going to explore a new process of selecting people onto our board. So our governance and our equity committee have scheduled joint meetings so that they can talk about how to make this possible, right? And what barriers we need to remove from our current policy that will allow folks that are not currently represented on the board, on our staff, to really engage with us and be part of our board leadership. Then we have number 5, which is expanding our applicant search tools to attract an even more diverse pool of people when we have job openings, right? That will be done in conjunction with the audit of our internal policies to help make sure that when we are seeking folks, when we're posting a new job, we are getting the resumes of people that are not necessarily accessible, most often in like your Indeed.com or your, I forget, the idealist.org or something like that, right? And then we're also going to be putting together, appointing a task force to help us understand how we're falling short on our shared values. And they will help us identify which lived experiences are not reflected in our board and staff, and reach out to folks who may have never engaged with us before and find out critical information as to why. Like what helps, what would make you feel seen, what would help you feel represented by Equality Texas. All that work will happen. We're just building a plan around all of these 7 deliverables.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this is just a note of how Equality Texas is evolving as an organization, right? And how you are kind of really moving from the past work that has happened, where there have been some like white-centered folks kind of on board or on staff, where there have been like a lot of issues as you've kind of like gone through already, and really trying to take ownership of that and move forward, and really think about how are we ensuring that white fragility, that those kinds of issues don't impact the work that you're trying to actually move forward for LGBTQ Texans, and knowing that we need to be thinking about all folks, in that we need to be thinking about Black and Brown Texans, we need to be thinking about Black trans Texans, and folks kind of across the entire state, and just how important that work is. And so thank you all for sharing that. Go ahead, Ricardo.
Yeah, I just want to add, this is not a complete picture of everything that we're going to be doing, right? Mm-hmm. This is almost like an olive branch extension to, and I want to say this explicitly, to other folks who are out in the community who may have been harmed by Equality Texas. Like, I want to know those things, right? Like, I want healing to occur. I feel like we cannot transform the organization without some healing taking place. And we've all gone through collective traumas, right? Most 2020 alone, we can name a few, right? And it's important for us, before we move forward, to really heal as a community. And I will do my best to proactively reach out to folks, to have conversations about how we can partner and how we could move forward. But these 7 things were the items that we thought could put us in the right direction in terms of having community buy-in and having folks hold us to account. It's just the beginning. This is a continued evolution, and it's going to take some time. Yeah,
definitely. And I'm excited to see the work that y'all do moving forward on that, because I think that you are really trying to move forward and really trying to move in the right direction for y'all. So one just last bit, as you're thinking about the kind of time it takes to do this work and the kind of intentionality that kind of goes into this, as you're thinking about moving beyond those like 7 steps that you've already talked about, what are some of the things that you're thinking about for how to be really intentional and how to really think about the timing for that kind of work, for beyond like the letter that you have so far and the accountability plans that you have now?
That's a good question. I think, like I said before, we're going to go into a strategic planning process come September or October, right? And that's going to detail what our next 3 to 5 years are going to look like at Equality Texas. And one of the main buckets that we're going to focus on is equity, right? And really building out a 3 to 5 year plan on how creating an anti-racist framework, applying an anti-racist framework, and then sustaining an anti-racist framework beyond the people who are here right now is going to become possible, right? So I would say the next step here would be making sure that this is embedded in everything that we do. And that's only going to happen with the strategic planning process.
Yeah. And I'd say the same thing goes with the Federation. To be really clear, as we're talking about this work, I know there's a lot of discussion happening in the comments about racial justice and where people are kind of like moving this forward and what kind of steps are people taking. And I would say, like, right now, we really are trying to think about and know what are the things that we need to do in order to support our members in doing that work. You know, the Equality Federation is a little bit of a different organization in that, like, our constituency are state-based LGBTQ equality organizations, like y'all at Equality Texas, like folks at other state-based equality organizations. And so we're really excited about working with y'all on this journey and kind of like assisting as best we can and working through that with each other. and also looking internally at our own selves and knowing what's happening here. We already prioritize racial justice workshops and work like that through our convenings every single year, and try to make sure that we are not just making space, but intentionally focusing on that and having that really live through all the work that we're doing. As we talk about doing this organizing work, it's really also about respecting and trying to live up to the standards of the folks who are already doing that work in the community. We know that when we send an organizer into a community to do that work, there have been people who have been living there for years. There have been people who have been doing that work for years, doing it already. And so if you want to hire someone in that community, find someone in that community to do the work. If you're an organizer kind of coming into that new work, we want to teach y'all how to build those relationships and really work with folks in a different way. And so I really want to thank both of you for your time today. This has been a really good discussion, and I appreciate all of the things that you are doing right now. Before we kind of wrap up and do like our final moments and kind of like final pitches for Give Out Day, Lisa, Ricardo, do you have any last things that either of you want to kind of like close out with?
That's such a big question.
I know, right?
You know, I think, you know, I've only been in Texas a year, but there is just an incredible amount of work and influence that the state has in what happens nationally, right? We have been talking about this idea of all eyes on Texas recently, and that's the truth, right? No pressure for us, but we really are kind of an opportunity state, and I say that in the best way possible, right? We're on the verge of some really meaningful, transformational change here in Texas, and I think for anyone considering donating because of Give Out Day, I think you are investing in that possibility, right? You're investing in the possibility of that meaningful change happening. We won't be the only ones driving it, right? So I would say consider other organizations locally like Tent and like ACLU of Texas and BTEC and FLOSS and STEP, right? And even Borderland Rainbow Center, like Resource Center, Montrose Center, right? Consider all of those organizations in the process as well, because they're thriving. Their survival is incredibly important to our success and the success of the LGBTQ movement in Texas. But for anyone that it has the resources to give during this time, I think you would be investing in meaningful change that has impact outside of just Texas.
Yeah. Lisa, any last words that you'd like to give us?
I think that the transformation has to start from within, and so this work has to be deeply personal. So we have to talk about our own experience or lack thereof with racism and just being discriminated based on who we are, and making that human connection and allowing people their humanity during difficult periods like 2020. And I really think that as we go into 2021, our legislative session in Texas, we already know that we're going to be deluged with anti-LGBTQ and especially anti-trans legislation. And so as much as we are used to being on the defensive, I think that with the partnerships that we are building right now, we can actually transform the conversation and not let everything that's happened in 2020 just be a fleeting moment.
Yeah. Thank you both. So one last pledge to remind folks to donate to Equality Texas for Give Out Day or to the Equality Federation. We at the Equality Federation are also encouraging folks to, if you donate to us, to also match your donation to another Black-led or trans-led organization. Some of the groups that we have specifically been calling out have been Black and Pink, Southerners on New Ground, or the Sylvia Rivera Law Project. I also personally have a deep heart for House of Tulip that's now building in New Orleans. It's building trans collective housing for folks. And I want to remind folks that Give Out Day is an important day, of course, and is an important time for us. But just like Lisa said, we have to kind of keep this movement going and keep the work going. And so really thinking about how are we making sure that every day, every time that we're building Black and Brown organizers, that we are building the work, and that we are really, as organizations that have a lot of work to do, that we are recognizing our work and creating actionable plans to make that happen. So thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Lisa, again, for being on with us today. And we're going to close down.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Is